From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, show about Star Wars, pop culture, the ultimate adventure, life itself. I'm Ken Knapsack.
I'm Jen Landa.
I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
And we're here to talk about Star Wars news, breaking news from a long time ago, or a couple days ago, or a couple weeks ago, or whenever we want to get to it. But a lot to talk about today as we gear up for Andor season. Before we do that, I want to remind you that today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. We're recommending Reign of the Empire, The Mask of Fear by Alexander Freed, a book that people are loving, finding odd comfort in, and also being frightened. It's a great read. Download your free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audiobook. We have some asks and updates as I power through the dark side of the forces in my tech. That's what's going on in the background here.
It's a cursed beginning of this episode of ForceCenter, and sometimes you just get cursed. Gotta move on. Yes, we've been staring at each other going, I can't hear you for about 35 hours, it feels like. But now we're recording and happy to be doing it. And of course, we're happy that you all are listening, watching. We want to get to some next goals on Patreon if we can. I know it's a very difficult time for a lot of people, and they're trying to figure out how to get by. And then if they can help people out. If you can help us out and you'd like to, we're building to a goal of 430 paid patrons on Patreon. When we get to that goal, we are going to release on a YouTube video a classic episode of Star Wars Ranked that used to be just audio, but not anymore. We're going to add some exciting and flashy visuals. What are they? We don't know. We haven't even picked which episode of Ranked. We will make that decision when we get to 430 paid patrons. Also want to let you know, as always, that you can follow us on Blue Sky. That is where we're spending most of our social media time these days.
Both in Star Wars and life.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to news, we always like to catch up. I'm in a collared shirt today, so that's where my life is. Interviews, trying to survive, get through, and not be frazzled. But I did succeed in not getting a little package of donuts this morning, even though I wanted in my heart. So is that listening to Yoda about, once you go down a dark path, forever will dominate your breakfast? Maybe. But I held strong. That's my lesson today. Hold the line.
Hold the line.
I mean, I have a donut for lunch, so I guess I've fallen to the dark side.
No, I think lunch that's different.
It is different. Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jennifer, did you have life adventures?
Well, I just want to say I'm a little disoriented because I'm having to use my daughter's headphones because mine were not working. I could only hear from one ear. But now this sounds a little weird. After my audiology class, I'm like, oh, it's very disorienting. That out of the way. A couple weeks ago, I went to the Rose Bowl flea market. And, I'm always on the hunt for collectibles. And I did come across a few Star Wars collectibles that I resisted buying. One was a Jabba the Hutt soap from, I don't know, early 80s. And there was this really cool blanket that I had never seen a pattern with, like the dewback. I got to post this because the face of the dewback looks like the dewback knows something. It's just great. But what exactly? But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm at the point, do I really need this? Do I really need this Jabba the Hutt soap? No. If I had more space, like if I lived somewhere else where we had, a huge basement or something, yes, I would buy it because I'd have a dedicated area for my collectibles. But
for Jabba soaps.
For Jabba soaps. Yeah, there was an Ewok shampoo too.
So when you say Jabba soap, it's not like a bar that has survived since the 80s, is it? Or is it like a pump? What
you know what? It actually might have been shampoo. It was in the shape of Jabba on his dais. It was all green, a plastic green thing. It was still sealed. And like at the bottom, you could unscrew it and get soap or shampoo. I don't know.
I mean, dealer's choice, maybe.
Yeah.
Out of the nethers of Jabba's body?
From yes, you're right. That's a little creepy. From the Ewok,
hey kids,
I think you could
put
get
this in your hair. The Ewok, was the Ewok the same?
the Ewok, oh wait, no, maybe it was at the bottom of the twist, but the Ewok was really cool because it actually looked more like a wood carving, but it was plastic. That one, I was like, oh God, do I do it? But I was there with my family and I'm on a budget. So I was like, I can't, how am I going to justify this to my family?
It's a soap dispenser. It's a permanent soap dispenser.
Yeah.
It's practical. Yeah.
Practical.
I'm just going to start calling all my action figure soap dispensers. Like, I'm sure I could get soap in there in theory.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Tried real hard. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have any other life adventures, Ken?
Oh, sorry.
Or a shirt and a donut. Is that it?
Shirt and donut. That's it. No, that's it. It's been another week, hasn't it? It's been a week, but things are hopefully looking up for me personally. Maybe we'll see. I don't know. Hope that's my Star Wars adventure.
Hope is good. Yes, it's been a very stressful week. On Saturday, Sarah and I went to Descanso Gardens. That anybody in the LA area or longtime ForceCenter listeners will hear me go on about it constantly. It is an absolutely a beautiful sort of structured nature preserve in a great place to wander around. And I was sitting on a bench and I posted this on social media. We often, my wife and I often take pictures of each other, but I just leaned over to literally touch grass and she took a picture of literally touching grass. And hey, it actually works. It's a very good idea. It's nice to be among nature. And it always makes me think of the lessons of many philosophies and many stories, but Star Wars in particular, I think is so much about the connection to the organic. And spending a little bit of time in nature does help a lot. So I had that very nice life adventure. And then I don't know who initially posted it, but that post was going around of that interview with Lucas from 2012, where he was being sort of asked about his politics and how they went along with Star Wars, and all great, wonderful stuff that we've talked about before and that I agree with. But it's kind of got that mic drop moment at the end where he's discussing a system of government, basically quoting Padme of that's based on the philosophy of let's try to do the best for everyone because everyone matters and everyone should have the best life possible. And the interviewer's like, well, what would you call that? And rattles off some isms in a, I think, kind of cynical way. And Lucas says, I'd call it common sense, which is just, I don't know. Those two things kind of the reminder of like the whole organic thing in Star Wars, the nature thing, the Force, the connection is the philosophy that we are all connected, and what another person's pain should matter to you because we're a network of humans interconnected with nature. So calling a political system that reflects that common sense is like nice mic drop from 2012, George Lucas.
George, I love that so many of his thoughts, quotes, scripts, dialogue are being replayed, and maybe nothing to do for us around these parts, but and I hate that it's having to be this way, but it's been interesting to see that and the reaction to it as always.
Yeah. And I think that kind of relates to some of the news we're going to talk about. Anything else before we talk news?
No, I'm really interested to get in here.
Well, the whole real theme of our news show this week is dark and gritty Star Wars. Going to be talking about some of the quotes from Tony Gilroy about Andor Season 2. But first, coming back from its grave, the Star Wars television show Underworld. Rick McCallum, the former Lucasfilm producer, appeared on the Young Indiana Jones podcast and talked about the live-action Star Wars show Underworld. That people talked about a lot back in the day. There were whispers, there were rumors, I think there were articles, but it did not happen. And here's what Rick McCallum said. I think we had over 60 scripts, third draft scripts. Again, the most wonderful writers in the world on it. We created exactly the same experience for everybody on the ranch. It was a phenomenal group of talent. These were dark. These were not, they were sexy. They were violent. They were just absolutely wonderful, complicated, challenging. It would have blown up this whole Star Wars universe. And Disney definitely never would have offered to buy it from George. Rick McCallum laughs. It's one of the great disappointments of our lives. But the problem was each episode was bigger than the films. The lowest I could get it down to with the technology that existed then was about $40 million an episode. So I didn't get a chance to actually listen to the podcast to read inflections or the questions that prompted it. So I'm just going off of this wonderful quote that was shared in many different articles. Ken, how do you feel about this quote? Do you have what if pangs for this Underworld series?
I don't think I did until now. This show's come up a lot this past week. This great Rick McCallum poll. I did not know this was out there. But I was telling you both off air, I caught a lot of the Ronald D. Moore interview with Katie Sackhoff on her show. Great stuff, by the way, if you're a Battlestar fan. They get into a lot of wonderful things. But, Ronald talked about the series and talked about the writer's room. Similar, I think that's what Rick is referencing here, similar to the Young Indiana Jones writer's room, which was international writers like Noah's Ark, 2 from this country, 2 from this country, 2. And you come to the ranch and you work on it. And he kind of described the same thing. And so it's been fascinating. I've thought more about this series than I ever did, even when it was rumored. Even when some of the stuff is not new information, if you've been around a bit it cost about $40 million, it was too expensive, about 50 to 60 scripts. We've heard that information before, but the renewed energy behind it, I have some what ifs now. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Thinking about the show in a way I hadn't thought about.
How about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, Rick McCallum is not one to use much hyperbole. Like, I trust his judgment. And if he says it was, what does he say? Wonderful. That to me is like, dang it would have been really freaking good. But to put things into perspective, and I'm not going to adjust for inflation, but like 40 million is insane because The Mandalorian, I looked it up, costs 15 million an episode. Game of Thrones, like the first 6 seasons, 10 million an episode, $40 million. I mean, I think that's why the volume for all the critiques that we may have, me personally, like it's the reason why we have a Star Wars show. It's why we have Star Wars series now, because they could get that technology and do it quicker and cheaper. So I had let this go because I used to really think about this a lot, right? And let it go and been like, it wouldn't have been right. But now I'm like, oh shoot, let's make this now. You want Disney Plus subscribers? They already got the scripts ready to go. Do it. Give George Lucas like a credit of some sort created by, or he could even be an executive producer, but just like in name only, not like in doing stuff, Do it. Do it.
I disagree. Yeah.
I know that Filoni had said in other interviews that they've pulled a lot from Underworld for The Mandalorian and other Disney Plus shows, and who knows how much of the little influences Andor might have from it. So, it would be amazing to just like release a book of scripts. Even that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it's no. You don't want a book of scripts?
No.
You don't have to read it.
No,
you don't want to have to read.
You want it more. No.
Well, I was just gonna say the whole what if thing is always dangerous because I think that can get to be a quick way to just bash whatever does exist. And I think a lot of people like, would you want to have the life you've led or the imaginary one that you haven't had to experience? The imaginary one. It would have been better, right? Like that's I think
that's such
a human psychology weakness. But it's great to hear Rick McCallum with his straight shooting, sexy, violent, wonderful. But I think the reason that I am having pangs for this now is not necessarily like, oh, it would have been better or whatever. But I have come to have such a love of not just the Clone Wars animated series, but the kind of no holds barred George Lucas that made the Clone Wars. I mean, the films by definition are like, well, they gotta be huge people pleasers, and they were financially, but they weren't critically. And it feels like with Clone Wars, you're just like, I just get to explore every instinct I have, from the silliest to the most pulpy to the most political. Ahsoka's just going to give a politics 101 lesson to the kids on Mandalore, and just spending money on it on a show that's like, no one would greenlight this because it doesn't have a place on the schedule that it should exist because it's too much for adults, it's too much for kids. The combination that George is going, I want to explore whatever idea in Star Wars I want to, and also as much as I absolutely adore Lucas, I do think sometimes some of the best Star Wars is he's got an idea and he's absolutely do this bonkers idea, but somebody who has more patience to write it and speak to actors, go execute it for me. I think a
Mhm.
lot of the Clone Wars are fantastic because they're George's. Nope, Darth Maul's coming back. Nope, we're doing a kaiju episode. Nope, we're doing a political episode. But other people can really have the patience to execute them. And I think the same thing with The Empire Strikes Back. I think,
Mhm.
you know, so I think the combination of, man, if they could have found a way to afford it, and George were just like, yeah, we're doing a 8-episode sexy romantic subplot, and and Ronald D. Moore is writing it, or whatever. I think that would have been fascinating.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really hung up on the Gum Chomping McCallum talking about the sexy, the dark, and everything, and what that would do to me. I'm someone here where this show. My one time on New Rock Stars, I got into a fight over this with the pundits. Where it's like, no, rated R Star Wars is not the thing that it's designed to be. Nothing like that. And Rick's not saying rated R, but
No.
in hearing him describe this, I was like, oh man, would that have changed my perception of it? By the way, I think Andor, I think Revenge of the Sith, I think all of it kind of move into the arenas Rick's talking about here. The landscape of Star Wars wouldn't have been changed. But just to hear him from the inside being like, oh yeah, it was sexy. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean, Rick?
Yeah,
I need to
what's
know.
I think like maybe the most explicit moment I think of the entire 6 films that George Lucas made is when Leia falls back on Han
Yes.
in the Falcon and Empire, and he said,
Yeah.
that's all I've got. Holding you is enough excitement. Like, that's all I got time for. That's
Yeah.
like about the most explicit
Yeah.
acknowledgement of actual sex
In Star Wars, yeah.
So I feel
Yeah.
like it had been such 1940s sort of romance sexuality, even Anakin and Padme. So if it had been like, there's a spy who's trying to seduce Tarkin's aide, and that's a plot,
Yes.
that I think is sort of sexy for Star Wars.
Yeah. And I'm not just focused on the aspect of it, but in terms of what if, like, that's what I've been thinking of more of, because we've again heard the stories. Saw Gerrera kind of came from this series, and he shows up in Rogue One and beyond, and we love that character, especially the questions he asks and raises. But yeah, what would have happened? And that price tag is immense. And it was one of the things that Ronald D. Moore was saying too. Like, George's plan was to do all of that on his own, and then go to networks and go, like this, yes or no, check box, yes or no, it's done. No notes from you. Release it or don't.
Air it or
that.
don't. Yeah, absolutely. So Rick McCallum talks about it, that Disney wouldn't have bought it. And I think from just the text, there's a little bit of confusion for me if he's talking about the fact that the $40 million an episode would have bankrupted Lucasfilm, or if he's talking about the a sexier, more adult Star Wars Disney might not have been as interested in at the time. That's, I think, very changed now. Obviously, since this show would have been a little bit the Andor of its day. But how do you guys feel? Jennifer, how do you feel if it had been made? If they found a way to do it, it bankrupted Lucasfilm, but it was phenomenally critically successful. If it was loved the way like Battlestar Galactica in that era was, that it was a little bit more adult, a little bit more sexy, but still Star Wars. What do you think the state of Star Wars would be now? I
think of the profit, right? So it's like, why does he think that it would not have been Disney? It would have not been as marketable for Disney. Disney wants to make merchandise. They obviously have incorporated it into the parks. They've made it, I don't want to say more family friendly, but certainly, which is in Star Wars' DNA, is that it's for everyone, right? This sounds like it was going to be catering to a more, young adult audience potentially. And I took it as that Rick McCallum was saying that like the content would have made it not as appealing, because it would have veered from this family friendly for everyone and really gone to more of like Darth Talon, sexy Twi'lek kind of thing. But the truth is, if it had been made, I think that there would have been that vocal minority who says, this is not my Star Wars. I don't like this. It's too weird. It's not what I would have done. But people forget that like
Mm.
prior to the Disney sale, there was tons of people, I think it was when the Blu-rays came out, where they were like, George ruined my childhood. People
Mm-hmm.
forget that. And
People
that's
versus
what
George
George was
Lucas
like.
was that era. Yeah.
Yeah, people were like, George was like, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. I've made my money. I'm getting out, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been as well received as I don't know. I just think that there would have been critics. I think that the critics probably would have gone after it too for various reasons. George Lucas was a punching bag for so many years,
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mhm.
don't think he could have won.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean it's hard to tell from Rick McCallum. Like, maybe there were episodes and arcs that were more sexy and gritty, and then maybe there was a live action D Squad in the middle. And I think
Right.
for people our age who, speaking very generally, gravitated towards things like Battlestar Galactica and wanted Star Wars to be a little bit more gritty and adult around this era, probably would have loved it. But maybe there would have been episodes where George Lucas was like back on his yeah, but I like it to be goofy and pulpy too. So maybe there would have
Mhm.
been tension there. But the thing that I think might have been interesting about it is I think it would have made the politics of Star Wars more clear. So in the Clone Wars, he's
True.
extremely explicit about the politics. There's no way around it in specific episodes and arcs. And so if it was a gritty adult show with, espionage and sex and Darth Vader killing a Jedi here and there,
Mm.
and it was just every episode beating the drum about what authoritarianism is, I wonder if people would have been more opened to the politics of Star Wars.
Could have been. Yeah. Yeah. So a Rorschach test of Rick McCallum's words. I have a little. I got to seek this out too. Of the context and the tone of there's a little bit of the I'm with you, Jen, of like you'd be like, Disney, you know what, they wouldn't have wanted this stuff. Ooh, smooching, we got smooching, or we got violence, or and I don't know if that's necessarily true. You said no, even now, Joseph. Yeah, I don't know if that'd be true. Hell, maybe they put on Hulu or FX. I don't know. But also, yeah, there's something about the budget and everything. But what's interesting to me is what you're talking about, the state of Star Wars. Look at what he did with Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. It didn't work because he went to the networks like, you want a Young Indiana Jones adventure? Great, cool. You want like that River Phoenix segment in Last Crusade? Awesome. We're going to do a whole series of it. Has nothing to do with that. In fact, it's going to be criticizing the world powers after World War I. It's going to be talking about the racism of America. It's going to be talking about our imperialism. It's going to be talking about real upfront and direct politics. And people weren't ready for it in the 90s. Maybe by this point, yeah, but the biggest thing that I think about the state of Star Wars in terms of the sale too is I think George, and he'd already done this with the Clone Wars. You're right to point out, Joseph, but I think with terms of live action, he would have been more comfortable having other voices write, direct, and take it forward. So maybe he still would have sold because that was part of it. Like, there's time for other people to do it, even though I'm going to hold on to it a little bit in my heart, which is understandable. But that he would have had even more confidence to go forward in some way, whether it's a sale or not, of I can give this up and have other people come in and direct not just animation. Again, not talking down on animation, but I've got Clone Wars going. I've got this going, and other people are in the room with me, and it's working. I think that would have been one of the more interesting things for him to experience that in a way that he only got experience with Clone Wars, but now not so much in live action with new Disney.
It'd be amazing if it had somehow worked and he had just held on to it and just kept making television shows where he could hold meetings, tell people the ideas, and then they went and did them.
And Jen, I really think you got a great point too. Of like a lot of the Saw Gerrera and everything. We hear his episode 7 ideas when that kind of emerged, which were actually old ideas that turned up in the Clone Wars, right? In general, Maul, the criminal underworld. Like I still don't know if it would have been a slam dunk, even whether it's good or not. I think we probably would have thought, yeah, it's good, but yeah, I think you're right. We forget during that era. Like if this was series was like, who's Saw Gerrera? Where's Han? Where's Leia? Right. Where's it's this era? Where's Obi-Wan? People would have been like, we need an Obi-Wan in the desert series.
Yeah.
Which now they're like, how dare we get an Obi-Wan in the desert series? So it would not be a sure thing.
No.
Exactly.
No. Nothing with Star Wars is a sure thing. And yes, I think it does bear remembering for those of us who experienced it, how despised George Lucas was. Despised. Yes. Anyway, moving on to happier thoughts of the dark, gritty Star Wars television show today. Perhaps really the legacy of Underworld in some ways is like we kind of have that with Andor in some ways. So Tony Gilroy had many quotes. He's been on a media blitz, and Disney is also really putting their back into promotion for Andor season 2 in a big way. They've released a 15-minute long Andor season 1 catch-up video on YouTube. Made season 1 available on Hulu if you only have that subscription and not Disney Plus. They've also made the first 3 episodes of season 1 of Andor available for free on YouTube. Gilroy did a live stream Q&A last Thursday. It is just Andor o'clock everywhere. Disney's putting its back into it and also really putting its back into it in a way where they're trying to reach non-hardcore Star Wars fans. So for Tony Gilroy's quote blitz, I pulled several quotes from a great compilation article that was put out by Star Wars Newsnet. I grabbed the ones that were interesting to me. If you're like, hey, what I need in my life are more Tony Gilroy quotes, you're in luck. There are so many more even than the ones that we're going to talk about. But here's what Gilroy said about promotion of the show while talking to TV Line. Gilroy said, I have friends of mine who love my work, or people I would meet who go on about Michael Clayton or go on about something else. And then I'll say, well, have you seen my show? And they'll say, well, no, it's Star Wars. I don't really. So I'm trying to win that audience over to let people know that this is the most important thing I'll ever work on. And I'm more proud of it than anything I've ever worked on. So I'm trying to pick up a few of those people. So confirmation from Tony Gilroy himself, like, yes, the marketing push is to people who are not hardcore Star Wars fans. Jennifer, how do you feel about that quote?
I say good luck. I think the problem is I'm sorry, because and here's the thing, like, this is high praise. Like, Michael Clayton, he wrote the Bourne series. Like, he's saying it's important because I think that he is trying to say something with this show, and I wish that more non-Star Wars fans would discover it. Unfortunately, the reality is that you're not going to reach a certain subset of people because it's on Disney Plus. If it was on Apple, if it was on Netflix, if it was on Max, HBO, whatever it is, you could reach those non-Star Wars people, or people that don't have kids, right? So it's like, who are you going to reach that's already not aware of it if they're on Disney Plus? Do you know what I mean? I think that's going to be the challenge for people, is who are not signed up for Disney Plus, who are these, I'm just envisioning, like, the Academy voters, like older people who don't have Disney Plus because they think it's, like, quote unquote for kids, right? I think he's going to have a tougher time reaching those 60-year-old people from the industry.
He needs to just be on every National Geographic show, because maybe there's some overlap there. And like,
hey, wait a minute.
I'll get Disney Plus for National Geographic.
Yeah, or Hulu, right? Yeah,
he pops up the bottom. Are you enjoying this hippopotamus? Let me tell you about Andor.
Did Albert Lynn just find a mystery city in Panama? Well, let me talk to you about hidden temples. I think that's really interesting with the dynamics of streaming. I was thinking about this quote so much just from the sort of not the practical approach of giving yourself access to it, but the honesty about, as you call it, Academy voter types, that Tony Gilroy would still be wrestling with people in his own life or fans of his who put Star Wars in a box for being too pulpy, too fantasy, too sci-fi, the age old. It's got bug-eyed monsters. How could there be anything important about it? And I think I really love this quote, and I think throughout his press tour, he's been pretty honest. And I think this is a great bit of honesty and great to make it personal and say there are people in my life who aren't giving my Star Wars show a chance. Ken, how do you feel about this quote?
It's fascinating. I feel 40 different ways, and I'll say I've liked Tony in this press run. I watched that live stream. Shout out to Ash Crossan, who saved that. It was wonderfully awkward. It was very, everyone did good. Gilroy, the actors, Genevieve O'Reilly, Adria Arjona, and Dominic Powell came on, and it was great. But it was like weird watching one of the biggest media companies in the world struggle with StreamYard. Though I understand, because today I'm having more technical difficulties with StreamYard. But shout out to Ash, who saved it. But he's been great, and I have been vocal. I've been even in our Discord. I think at times Tony's been kind of a pretentious dude who brought some energy to Star Wars that I didn't enjoy. But also, I have to be honest that it's often the outside influences that I'm battling. It is the people who are Star Wars fans who are like, finally a cool Star Wars, finally dark and gritty, and I'm always like. Obi-Wan Kenobi started with a slaughter of children. Like, what's your definition of gritty? And this is something we've faced, and we'll perhaps talk about our own histories here. But all that aside, hearing this quote and seeing, I was someone who was on board with that first marketing teaser trailer, on board with what it was doing, because it's just a reality of what he's talking about. Like, he's put 10 years into this franchise, and he's put his heart into it. He's done such a good job with Rogue One, saving it, this series. All his writers, all his staff, and then I'm sure in his circles. Oh, what, Tony, you working on that little space thing? You're working over at Disney. You get doing kiddie rides. It's frustrating, and I like that he's feeling the frustration, if that makes sense. I like that he's kind of going, no, but hold on, and I think they need it. And Jen, to your point of like getting outside, I'm hearing slight rumors that this show could have a network TV run. That you could see more of these things pop on up on ABC, because the arbitrage that is streaming for a lot of these companies is getting deeper and deeper. So it could find its footing amongst people who are like, oh, I thought Star Wars was this. And it's okay to think that. It's okay to grow up not liking this stuff, right? It's okay to think comic books are just for kids, because that's what the world taught us all, unless you knew, right? And now we're having this great period, last 10 years of going back and going, no, there's this, that. There's all these meanings to this art. It's just packaged in a way that is, myth-based and special and has a lot of whimsy, dear God. So I really liked what he was saying here, which is maybe a change from my past on Tony.
Jennifer,
yeah, about ABC, that would be huge. That would reach a much broader audience who would give it a chance and see it's not just Star Wars. I mean, quite frankly, Tony's being like us, where we're like, no, you guys, Skeleton Crew is really good. Like, you should watch Skeleton Crew. And it's like, well, it's not a Star Wars show. Yeah, yes, but it's great, right? So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. No, I think Andor is so much about so much for our reactions to it. My reactions to it are about tone and about different people's historical reaction to tone. Because I absolutely agree with you about the Obi-Wan Kenobi thing, Ken. Of like, people are calling that show silly and light, and like, look at the surface. And then some people, I think, are kind of pushed back, either love Andor because the tone, or resent Andor because the tone. And I think the tone is, and the style in the presentation is, prestige television. And I don't use the word prestige television as the actual meaning of the word prestige, of like better than. I mean it as a genre, the same way like Academy Award winning tearjerker is a genre, and there are good ones and there are bad ones about very, very sad things that are filmed in a way that are very, very important, with a close-up of the most famous person in the world crying, and then therefore they get an Academy Award. Like, and I think that prestige television is like that, where there are ways of shooting it, ways of writing it, ways of performing it, that the tone, the language, the genre is prestige television. And I think Andor does that, and it makes some people love it, and it makes some people kind of resent it as like, oh, the Star Wars that thinks it's better than Star Wars. But this time around, for me, I'm just really feeling the like, I want to move past all of that, and I want to enjoy the substance. What is the story? What are the performances? What is being said? What am I being asked to feel by the story?
I like what you said there, trying to move past it. I'm trying to be open and honest too, but where I've we've been, the three of us have been in the trenches for a while here, but that was a lot of my resentment. Certainly wasn't the show, and that was always my arguments of me going, no, listen to me. I'm saying I love Andor, and it might be the best made, but I don't want you to take that as a baseball bat to the knees of every other show. And that's been the fight we've been in, and so. Some of Tony's stuff, some of Stellan Skarsgård's quotes, if it's like Star Wars for adults, like that stuff rubbed up against me, not because they said it or it wasn't true. I got their meaning, but I'm with you. I think this time around, I want to release the angst I have for that stuff and just enjoy it on my own.
Yeah. I mean, I did just in my mind like, what's the farthest removed from Andor, and I saw Nubs from Young Jedi Adventures. I'm like, all right, this is a wide distance that Star Wars can cover. Jennifer, I really like what Tony Gilroy is talking about, where the people in your life are not valuing the thing that's actually the most important to you. Have you experienced that? What Tony Gilroy is talking about, where the thing that you care about the most is not what the people in your life are willing to focus on.
I'm no Tony Gilroy. I'm just a commercial actor. It was. And that was always a challenge is, when your family is like, do something sensible, make a living. And for a while I was making a living, which is fun. But at the same time, when people ask you, what have I seen you in? And you're like, oh, Tostitos commercial or a Bud Light commercial. And it's like, oh, which to me was a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
I was so proud. I had gone on 50 auditions and booked like 1 or 2 commercials. And it was like, that was huge. But it's like, oh, that's what you do? Like, so yeah, it's always a challenge. I think for a lot of people, if you're a creative person, oftentimes, especially when you're spending a lot of time on something and they're not seeing the results. And quite frankly, you may not be seeing the results, but you are driven and you have to keep doing it because there's some crazy thing within you that's like, I have to do this with my life, right? Or my free time.
Yeah. What is life if not your free time? Ken, how about you? Have you had this where somebody wants to focus on the thing that is not as important to you as opposed to the thing that, like, hey, this, like Tony Gilroy is saying in this quote, this is the most important thing I will ever do.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. All three of us being creative people experienced it, and the battle just, even in genres of comedy, like, I'll take my jokes at I'll throw my jokes at improv, but like, hey, I've got an improv show, like snicker, snicker, snicker. I'm doing sketch, or now I'm doing stand up. Oh, you're one of those. Like, I think we felt that, and just sometimes the lack of support. I was 20 years old having a radio show on a reporting radio station, meaning one that reports to record companies, a legit radio station, and people in my family weren't listening because they were like, "Oh, we don't like rock and roll." I don't care if you don't like Stone Temple Pilots, but I'm getting a dream right now in front. Like, so I've battled that my whole life, and in terms of just being a fan and a nerd and that kind of stuff, but also being touching both worlds. Why I'm a sports fan and played some sports and all that stuff, and just you see the disparaging words and jokes. You feel the disparaging words and jokes and everything at just simply being a quote nerd because the way society built it up to be. So I think on every level we felt it, and that's why again I there's a little bit of joy, good joy in going, see, Tony, see, I'm glad you're on this side.
Yeah, no, I mean now he knows what it feels like.
because I'm sure, you know what? Tell you what, I don't know. Again, I always try to say we're building up this character of this guy named Tony Gilroy we've never met. But I bet in the past he was like, oh, what are you pitching a Lucasfilm? What, do a little Star Wars story? What are you doing? I bet he had those conversations with his friends.
I like that your Tony Gilroy speaks like Bill Burr. Oh, you doing a little Star Wars?
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway, fascinating. We could do a whole episode on Bill Burr. Yeah, I think I think that quote really just resonated with me because I think even when people they certainly don't mean any malice, but I know that pain of like, there have been eras in social media where I'd be really lucky to have, like, back in the day, a tweet do well and people like the tweet, and some famous actor retweeted it, and that's really cool. Like, oh, baby New Earth retweeted your tweet, and it'll be like, that will be on social media, and then I'll be like, hey, I wrote and performed a 1-person show, complex themes, I sold it out to like an 80 seat house in this thing for my soul, and they're like, yeah, but actor hit button.
Yeah.
And there's moments where just kind of like what we value from the amount it takes from the person versus its value in society can be out of whack, and I kind of feel that in Tony's quote of like, yeah, but Andor is incredibly important, and like, yeah, but did it get released in movie theaters? Does it have monsters? Does it have George Clooney, or does it have a monster guy? Because it's got a monster guy. I'm not like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to some other Tony Gilroy quotes. Excuse me. Tony Gilroy talked about the release schedule with Collider. He confirmed that the episode lengths are similar to season 1. In those episodes range from 39 to 55 minutes. Now, if you subtract about 7 minutes of that for credits and previously on stuff, that averages out to about 40 minutes per episode of storytelling. 40 times 3 is 120 minutes. So for actual storytelling time, we are probably looking at 2-hour movies per week. Here is what Gilroy said about this release schedule and structure. We made 8 Star Wars movies in 5.5 years, and that's how we shoot them. The directors come in and do blocks of 3, so it's baked into our whole psyche from the moment we started. 3, 3, 3, 3. I mean, it was super groovy to like roll out season 1 for like 3 months. It was like Christmas every Wednesday, but I'm into this. I like this idea. So, Ken, does it change your opinion of Andor if you think about the whole show as a series of interconnected films? The way he's talking about, we made 8 Star Wars movies.
It does. No, I like it. And, we're not going to rehash all the things we talked about season 1, some of the endings and beats we didn't like. It wasn't necessarily the show, it was the presentation. And he continues to make jokes about sorry podcasters. He did it on the live stream. So putting that aside, putting our own ForceCenter schedule, which is still to this moment up in the air. Bear with us, folks. I'm actually excited this time around. I would have preferred 12 weeks of this. But to sit down and be able to just go through it and not have some of that angst this time around, or not hear some of the discourse, or not just get bogged down in some of the speculation. This show has a little less of the speculation the other shows do because of the way it's presented. You know what I mean? But like, I oddly this time around, I think again he's winning me over. I never disliked the guy because I don't know him, but like his quotes this time around, I think are honest, raw, refreshing, and I like that even he was like, yeah. Because remember, the clip out last week was Disney's decision. Bum, bum, bum. And he's like, yeah, we learned about it. I'm kind of on board for this. So therefore, I'm kind of on board for this. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, Jen, how do you feel? Do you think, do you enjoy the idea of thinking of Andor as a whole series of interconnected films?
I would like to think of it more as chapters in a book. So that way it'll feel less daunting, because if I'm supposed to dissect, which I have to, that's just who I am, a movie, right? And all these movies, that's going to be a lot of freaking work. Not even as a podcaster, but just as a fan. So if I just approach it more like, okay, this is just like a complete chapter of a book, I can process a story in that way. It just feels a little bit more manageable, but it's interesting. It's cohesive. I don't know. I feel like everyone's just kind of figuring this out in the world of streaming.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, I think that, in my opinion, executives perhaps could have looked at the decades of what a television show is to help them figure out if they wanted to do television shows or movies. In season 1, I think my favorite episode is Announcement, which isn't the only one that isn't part of kind of its own arc. It's the bridging episode. It's the great episode with Mon Mothma getting Tay involved in the Smile line and all of the heading to trying to escape to somewhere warm and safe with Andor and the Pizos and whatnot. That said, I do just I really so powerfully remember getting these streamers and watching the first 3 episodes of season 1 back to back and going, this is fantastic. And then the first episode of the next arc going like, oh, wow, this kind of arbitrary break really affected my enjoyment, because they weren't built to have a ton of speculation of what will happen next. It was like, well, probably the damn raid they've been talking about for 2 hours. That's probably what's going to happen next. And given that we've seen this clip in 8, so it didn't have the fun of a television show of, especially an espionage television show of, how are they going to get out of this one? What will happen next? Because they weren't built that way. So I'd be fascinated to see down the line the arcs cut together to play as films, and I'm really excited to see how that plays out in season 2. Ken, how would you feel if the next Star Wars show was announced this way? What if they're like, you know what, damn it, this works. So we're doing Kenobi season 2, but it's actually going to be 3 90-minute films.
At this point, whatever it takes to get more Kenobi, more Ewan as Kenobi.
I stuck that in there in the question. Yeah.
No, I think now more than ever, I'd be into it. I think I would have been podcast grumpy about, no, we must. In my day, we had 22 weeks of television, and I miss that sometimes, and I think the industry misses that sometimes, and so I still would be on board for that. But I just think maybe I'm in a different period of my fandom right now, where I think sitting down for 90 minutes and not having to worry, and this is probably just me, but having, this is only 28 minutes. Oh, this is 47 minutes. Oh, this is 32. And sometimes when I'm watching these episodes, I can't disconnect from, that's why I try not to look at the running time. And that's why I don't like when people post here's the running times. Like, just don't for me. But it's personal. That people might not be affected. And so if Kenobi season 2, and it's going to be 2 90-minute movies. Great. Let's do it. I think now more than ever, I try it out.
Yeah. Jen, how would you feel about that?
I'm going to be the old lady shouting at the clouds. I think it's a terrible idea. I think that, and it's not just for me, because I'm struggling with my schoolwork. It's for a lot of people who don't have the time or have to watch it on the weekends because of their work schedule, right? And the problem that I have is really it's the online discourse. I like being able to process the episode when I can, go to online, see the chatter, right? But if you can't do that and watch it immediately, then you have to basically black yourself out of social media for several days. And I don't think that that's realistic. And I think it will hurt the show. I know some people that are like, I'm not going to watch it until one sitting and I can watch everything, So I just think, I don't know. But then again, we're spending more time indoors and at home, which is actually not a good thing.
I think, I think the real defining thing is the release, and it'll be seen with Andor of like weekly movies. It's really hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
For me, I would love to see them either go, you know what, we're doing a television show. We're doing like 12 seasons. They're going to be, 30 to 40 minutes per episode. And it's going to be really structured like a television show. It's meant to be meet the characters. They have an adventure. Maybe there's a cliffhanger, but each episode is a complete meal. Or go, you know what, we do want to tell one more Kenobi story. Let's break it up into 3 90-minute movies, and we'll release one every 3 weeks so people have time to absorb them like a movie. But the Andor, a movie a week, I definitely agree with you, Jennifer, about all of the pressures on releasing a movie a week. It'll be fascinating.
I'm gonna podcasting aside, to your point, Jen, of like, I wonder what the numbers are going to end up being. And I know there's a lot of thoughts, the award season thing, the network television, whatever the reasons, or just like, hey, what if we did this? I wonder what the numbers will be like, when 2 weeks in, someone's like, yeah, I haven't had time to watch the first movie, let alone the second movie. I wonder if they'll see that. And, we'll never know. We'll never know the numbers, but curious.
Yeah.
You know what it makes me think about is Stranger Things and the first season of Stranger Things and how they released it all and people, quote unquote, binged it, right? Are people binging series as much as they did? Because maybe it was just my time period, but I feel like there's more stuff to watch that I'd have to really pick and choose what I want to, quote unquote, binge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, from anecdotal social media evidence, some people still, I'll see posts where people say, I prefer binging, but like Stranger Things is a great example of like, I really like that show. And I think, the second and third seasons, I really made an effort to get caught up and watch it that weekend and be part of the community and not have spoilers. And whatever, I think it was the fourth season that had that were basically movie length. Some of them were like 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I think we watched it like 3 weeks, a month after it came out. Cause just like,
same.
Yeah, no, I mean, we need to eat and shower and whatnot. It just doesn't fit in our lives,
Right.
Yeah. It's all personal preference. I know, Grace kind of prefers waiting till they're all done and streaming through things. I just did that with Hacks. I've been years late on that show after years of people saying, watch it. I sat down and watched it in little binges, and it worked. So it's all personal preference for sure. But this could be daunting. This might be daunting for folks, but it's also going to work out for other folks too. I know.
Yeah. We will find out very soon. Moving on to more Gilroy quotes. He also addressed how Andor might feel a bit topical. He didn't say this, but given the current push toward authoritarianism across the globe in recent years, Gilroy echoed some statements he made about the first season, saying, we were just talking with someone about how Mon Mothma and Vel come off Chandrila, and you're thinking about, oh my God, all the early Christians in the Roman Empire of the elite. What was that like? People breaking away. The sorry truth is, here's a cliche, history repeats itself. So I want to make the show timeless, I suppose. He had said similar things like, look, no, the battle against authoritarian governments and the way different people come together to resist, and the class warfare that's going on in the show, all this stuff has many different examples in history, and here's all the different historical points we pulled from. But now this show is coming out in this moment in the real world. Ken, how do you feel about Andor as a timeless story? Do you think Star Wars has always been both timeless and relevant?
Yeah. Going back to George writing about Nixon and what could happen, and bringing in the historic view on it. Yeah, and something we've discussed here before, the fascism playbook and everything. But it doesn't mean, the early chapters of Alexander Freed's Reign of Empire, Mask of Fear, like, had some specific things where it was like, wow, and it feels it. But it's like, the dude wrote the book 2 years ago, right? And I like this part of the interview was interesting to me. It was almost a little awkward moment of Tony's like, well, basically saying like, yeah, I mean, we didn't write this last month, like we've been working on this, and I love what he did, bringing in the early Christians, the Roman Empire, and all those kind of things, because it does mean this show will have relevance, unfortunately, forever. Let's look at it as a signpost on the road. So it's hard to ignore the relevancy, but this is kind of where Star Wars has always been, right? I mean, George brought this forth in 1999 to 2005, and it was relevant then. More than people knew or wanted to pay attention to, and now it is even more relevant. But it's 25-year-old stories, so Andor's going to sit nicely in that little nest.
Yeah, I really agree about that, and thought about it of like that it is both timeless and relevant, because I think Star Wars is this big myth, but the way Lucas created it, it's also personal to the creators and their passions and what they feel. And the original trilogy being steeped in Western Joseph Campbell myth and spirituality informed by Eastern philosophy. There's so much about Star Wars that feels so ancient, but Lucas was also like, an angry younger man from hippie Northern California who had some strong opinions about Nixon in Vietnam. And I'm also just really fascinated the way that the story he envisioned for how did the empire happen is a lot what Gilroy's talking about. It's timeless. Here's the pattern of authoritarianism. Here's how it happens. Here's how a society will defeat itself by giving power to someone that they shouldn't. That his basic story for the empire it's in the prologue of the novelization of Star Wars that we always talk about, of the government got complacent. It wasn't helping people. There was greed. But by the time he gets around to actually telling that story, that timeless story in the late 90s or 2000s, some of those elements are very real. Corporate greed in America had become much, much more prevalent in the process of him making the films and releasing them. In post 9/11 America, suddenly that this kind of imperialism was really happening to the point where he had Darth Vader quote George W. Bush. So I think even just thinking about his construction of the empire, it was timeless when he had it included in the prologue of the novelization. But by the time he actually told the story, he made the choice to make it literally relevant by quoting the sitting president, by naming the Nemodian after a politician. So it's always been this interesting balance of timeless and relevant. Jennifer, how do you feel about the timeless and relevant nature of it?
I think what's interesting is how George Lucas took things, I'm sure, that from his childhood, so history from the past, which is what history is, you know what I mean, as opposed to recent history. But he also melded it with current things and things that he was feeling and wanting to comment on. And I think that that's what makes these stories timeless and also relevant. And Tony Gilroy's calling this out early, saying, the early Christians in the Roman Empire. It's like, okay, but we know he's going to bring in some probably current things or more recent history, because that's just what you do when you're a creator of Star Wars. Star Wars exists in the context of when it is made.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think about a lot. And yeah, it's fascinating, and it's why they're not just space fantasy or fun little romps with wizards and laser swords, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
much deeper than that. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if America, or really even the world, because it's a global situation with the push towards far right authoritarianism, if we weren't currently in the throes of that battle, Ken, would you receive Andor differently than?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And I wish, how do I say this? I'm not happy the way it's all played out, but I'm like glad I have the understanding I do of these stories that I don't think I would have had in 2016 if the big election that year went differently. You know what I mean? Like, it would have been a nice, happy, warm place of a space government doing things, and that distance would have been built in there. What you got is fine, and we always say, because you come to Star Wars for the pew 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 or for the nubs of it all. You can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Not that Nubs doesn't have a lot of valuable lessons
Mm-hmm.
around him, but it would be, and I think there's it's also an interesting discussion too about Andor, even season 1 now that has changed from, I think, when Andor came on, of like some of the characters, Saw and Luthen, and what they're there, and even how we broke it down or discussed the themes, and like it's complicated. It's complicated conversations when you look at the real world, and we're going to be taking that head on in season 2. But yeah, yeah, you know what I mean. What I'm saying, like, I'm glad I'm taking it this way, but I wish I didn't have to.
Yeah, Jennifer, how do you feel about how do you think the current state of the world is going to impact the way you see Andor?
I think it will hit harder, right? It'll be more poignant. But that's why art is so important during these times, is that if we weren't going through this, we might look at it and go, wow, that really sucks. But now it feels much more cathartic. It's a way to feel like these emotions and the things that we're feeling. We feel seen when we see these characters on screen triumphing. It can give us hope, even though this is a made up world, right? It can give us hope that yes, if we come together, things can change, things can get better. So art like this is incredibly important during times like this.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that I do ultimately really agree with Tony Gilroy that these things are cycles and they're timeless, and I'm sure they were pulling from many different ideas, and some things are like, well, this is already established and we're running with this. But I don't think that the Andor team is as cheeky as George Lucas. I don't think any of these. I don't think there's going to be a Nemodian that's basically Cruz Ed or anything like that. I don't think it's going to be as blatantly.
What if there was?
I don't think it's going to be blatantly of the moment, but when Andor season 2 was written, the world was the world. We've accelerated the problem, but the problem was there. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I got it, and even as a young man, I got it in the prequels, but it felt much more like a cautionary tale than a
a mirror.
Anyway, a mirror. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And a complicated one.
Yeah.
Because anyway, Jennifer, you were touching on this, but Ken, I want to ask you, do you feel like telling stories of authoritarianism and the hope of breaking through of the cycle? Do you think that can telling stories of hope, give people hope and about how to break through the cycle?
It can give people hope that you and I and some, even our ForceCenter listeners, have all expressed some sort of odd comfort in reading Mask of Fear. There's that. I also think it allows, in doing it in this form, in the Star Warsy way, does allow for change. I've been open and honest with some of my changes over the years, going back to even Rogue One to now, and I think it's important to just let people go on their change journey. Change happens way too slow. Great James Baldwin quotes out there about change and how long it can take and how dangerous and deadly that can be for a lot of people. But I also think in terms of just like, if a Star Wars story can get under your skin in a way that you weren't thinking about where it might break down the walls for you to look at this kind of stuff differently than you would if it was your friend or a family member or some other bar arguing politics with you. I do think this can provide hope, understanding, and the impetus to change.
Yeah, Jennifer, any thoughts on that?
One of the challenges is that because it's art, it's subjective. And so we may see very clearly what is happening, and somebody will see something totally different and see themselves as the quote unquote good people. And you're like, no, you're on the other side. So, but one of those things is that, like, if you are to have these face-to-face conversations with people and you want to, maybe open their eyes, you could use maybe things that are happening in the show. Like, hey, remember this episode, or in Andor, this happens, and connect it to what's happening today. I don't know. It's really tough. Especially
but that stuff does work. Even talking about in simple pro wrestling terms is something I've been doing for story breakdowns for years. And just, it's a shorthand.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I think that I've been thinking about a lot lately of how much stories do change us. I think every once in a while there's like one story that breaks through. I've certainly had, like, I saw a film, a great film, and I was like, I finally understand this issue or this perspective in a way I didn't before. It certainly can happen that one story can change you. But I've just been thinking a lot about there's a difference between one story and a story told so frequently that it seeps into our DNA. And it's not even like, I learned that from watching television. It's just truth. I look at the amount of sort of baggage about what it means to be a man and gender dynamics and what kind of man you should be to make a woman want to date you and all that kind of stuff. Like, I didn't just learn that from Cheers. I learned that from Cheers and Night Court and Moonlighting, and every story I saw reinforced damaging ideas of what masculinity is. And I think that there can be a positive version of that. I think that there can be, I think if we can pull out of the nosedive towards authoritarianism, I think we should be telling lots of stories about why authoritarianism is bad. What does it look like? How should it be resisted? And tell those stories so much and so often that they sink into the DNA. And it's not even I learned it from watching these 7 shows. It's that the story becomes a part of us. And hopefully Andor and Star Wars can continue to contribute to that tradition.
You and I both grew up on those comic book ads of guys kicking sand on the other guy.
Take these, whatever. What were they selling? Pills or
powder?
Weights or powder? Powder. Powder. Yeah. Anyway.
Wait, didn't we all have that fear of quicksand? Did you guys have that fear of quicksand? Yeah, that was because, right? Like the cartoons used to, I think, talk about quicksand a lot, or there were movies, and so it's like, if you tell, even quicksand, right, became a part of our consciousness. You can do that for quicksand.
Quicksand and sharks while living in Minnesota. It was,
and rodents of unusual size.
Yes. Well, moving on to our last thing, we got to wrap up so we can go live to talk about our Q's episode. So Gilroy also talked about canon. Here's what he said about the Gorman Massacre. There's also a bit of confusion about the Gorman Massacre and what is the Gorman Massacre. There's a lot of confusion within the canon, so it was an opportunity to rebuild in a really significant way. It's a very significant part of our show that can do a lot of different things for us. Quite honestly, it's very expensive to build, so we really want to use it as much as possible. So it carries over 5 different episodes. I'm really confident that the really deep, passionate Star Wars community will appreciate how we straightened out that story. Ken, how do you feel knowing that Gilroy and his team are very aware of deep, passionate Star Wars community? Why do you think that is important? Why do you think canon is important in this context?
Yeah, it's been a great time. I can't wait to explore this. But it's a great time hearing him kind of describe this. And this was stuff last time out that we talked about, him being very aware of Mothma's speech and what it was about and dropping the Gorman thing and just knowing it. So I still, we're going to bump up against canon, I think, with the K2SO stuff. Sorry, fans of that Acker and Blacker comic episode or comic book issue. I think that's going to change, and I think that's fine. We can have that discussion some other time. But him having an understanding, but also a passion for, now we get to define that and it fits so well into what we're trying to do. I'm excited about that, and it all makes sense. It all makes sense. I know that the view of the story group has changed over the years, because I think the idea of what they did was incorrect in the beginning by the general Star Wars fandom. But they're still there to lean on, and this kind of stuff's great.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, how do you feel about Gilroy talking about the deep, passionate Star Wars community?
Good for him for recognizing us. Although I don't know what there was to be straightened out by the Gorman massacre, so I was like, oh shoot, like I'll brush up on that. So
it's undefined, and a lot of it there was a Legends version that is long gone in the past, but it's just always existed as a thing, even in Rebels. But yeah,
yeah, there's a Legends version, and then it's been referenced in Rebels, but I think not entirely, codified exactly what it is. I think that's what he's talking about, to my understanding. I do just like him saying, like, that's a truth that any creator of Star Wars needs to be aware of. Is like, we got to pull in my friends who won't give it a chance because there's monsters in it. And there's a deep, passionate Star Wars community. And it's nice to hear him talking about not just the Gorman Massacre, but the idea of canon. And I think sometimes when we talk about canon, we just get sort of pedantic of like, is it going to, change this comic book? And that's a no. Or just the pedantic version of canon of that wasn't the color of Luke's shirt that day, right? But the canon he's talking about isn't, the DL-44 blaster wasn't on the market in that day, so Cassian can't have it. I think he's talking about the kind of canon that's the why of the story of like, I'm not going to just reject it. It's really important. It's the why of Mon Mothma's story. Cool. Any other thoughts, Ken, on the value of focusing on the Gorman Massacre as a big point of Andor Season 2?
I'm just fascinated, and I echo, I think, what Alex Damon said this weekend, where he's like, I'm oddly looking forward to it, which is not what you want to associate with Massacre, but I'm looking forward to it being defined. And again, like I said, the big why. That's always what we've been interested in here, the emotional canon, the whys behind it. And I think this is going to be powerful and resonate.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get lost in ideology, but the reason to resist authoritarianism is because beings suffer, and being able to see and feel that and make it not conceptual, not ideological, but extremely real is so important. And I think that seems to me the focus on like, let's pick one society in one incident and have it truly be the face of why the Empire must be stopped. So I'm excited for the story of the Gorman Massacre, but it is weird to be like, yay, Gorman Massacre. Jennifer, any thoughts for you on the Gorman Massacre being a focal point of this season?
Good to have Star Wars history tell something about our history, perhaps. So,
Yeah. Well, like I said, there are many more Gilroy quotes, but we should wrap up so we can get to our Q's episode. Ken, any final thoughts about the dark, gritty, sexy side of Star Wars?
I'm ready for it. I was ready for it then. Again, that definition of what dark and gritty and even sexy. I mean, I can remember the ooh in Attack of the Clones when you smash cut to Padme and Anakin, like, or even in Revenge of the Sith. So I'm open to it. I'm excited. I can't wait to have this show drop in our laps this next month.
Me too. Jennifer?
Oh, I was going back to Rick McCallum's quotes. Make it, you cowards. I want to see it.
Maybe Tony Gilroy will turn around and go, all right. I won't leave Star Wars. Right. I'll make Underworld. Yeah. Exactly as it was written back in the day. Yeah, no, I think we talk about the buffet of Star Wars, and there's the dark, gritty, in modern parlance, the genre, the tone of prestige television. It seems like that is always going to be a part where Star Wars was interested. A part of the buffet was interested in exploring between Underworld and Andor. Seems inevitable, so I'm excited it's here. That's it, Ken.
That is it. Hey, thanks for listening today on our news episode. Thanks for joining us yesterday on the Q's that we're about to do now. You can find us on Blue Sky ForceCenter Pod. Our podcast is available in a lot of spots. Just search. You'll find us. And don't forget, on Sundays, we drop Databank Brawl Redo, where we go back and replay old Databank Brawl episodes. A lot of fun there. Merch available 2 spots, TeePublic and Fourth Wall. Links down below on YouTube if you're watching there. If you're on YouTube, give us a like and leave a nice comment, all those good things. Or subscribe if you haven't already, as we push towards 10,000 subscribers. Patreon.com/ForceCenter is where you can support us. More things over there. Follow me at Cadnapsuck Or my website, kentupsuck.com, which I got a notification that it was down, but it's still there. So I still think I exist on the internet. Joseph?
I just barely clinging to the internet. You can find me on Blue Sky and my website, which I believe is up, josephscrimshot.com.
And Jennifer, where can they find and follow you? And where can Rick McCallum reach you to say, all right, we'll do it?
Rick, contact me. Oh, I'm sorry to get shouted into the mic. You can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram at Jennifer Landa, or TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138.
Well, there you go. That's it. We'll see you next time here on ForceCenter.